Do the Tories need to embrace Nigel Farage? So the former Home Secretary Suella Braverman reckons so. She said that Farage should be welcomed by the Conservative Party and that the Tories are a broad church and should not exclude anyone who wants the Conservatives to be elected. But the Reform Party leader is not without controversy. Farage sparked a backlash this weekend when he suggested that the Prime Minister doesn't understand our culture.
It's appalling, and it shows the man doesn't understand. He's not basically patriotic. He doesn't care about our history, frankly, our culture. And it shows just how disconnected this Prime Minister is.
Do you think he's right? And do you think that the Conservative Party need to embrace him? Do get your calls in, 0207 862 2222. But I'll start with my panel. Nina, do you think we should embrace Nigel Farage? The Conservative Party embrace Nigel Farage?
Oh, the Conservative Party can do what it likes. I don't care about the Conservative Party. But seriously, it's come to a pretty state when they are considering embracing Nigel Farage. But you notice that it's the extreme right wing of the Tory party who are saying this. The sort of the centrists and the moderates are not saying that at all. The trouble is that Nigel Farage is the most dangerous man in British politics. And people...
Why do you say that?
Because he doesn't appear dangerous, because he doesn't appear to be radical, he doesn't appear to be... He seems like this affable guy down the pub, and I speak common sense, and I'm only saying what you think, and I'm only voicing the opinions of ordinary people, and very bluff and hale-hearty and all of that.
Because he cuts through, because he appeals to the general public.
Because he is a brilliant, brilliant communicator. But he's been playing the long game. Without Nigel Farage, I don't think we'd have had Brexit. And if you look at the way he's positioned himself, he went on, you may think this is a frivolous thing, but he went on Celebrity Jungle last year so that he exposed himself to a vast number of viewers who wouldn't normally look at...
Well, he was quite open about that being the reason that he did it.
Absolutely, but it worked because a lot of young people watch The Jungle and therefore they could see him as just a human being, if you like, which has nothing to do with politics. But he's like one of those giant poisonous lizards. They don't actually kill the prey. What they do is they give it a bite or a scratch, poison them, and then they just follow them.
So I'm getting the impression from you, Nina, that you don't care whether the Conservatives embrace him or not, as long as the general public don't embrace him.
Yes.
Cristo, how do you feel about it? Would it be a sensible move? From what Nina says, it would probably be a sensible move for the Conservatives to embrace him because he cuts through with the public, because people like him.
If they want to get elected, they probably should. I'm not a huge fan of Nigel Farage. I don't feel like some of his language and rhetoric is particularly well judged. I think that some of what he says goes a little too far for my liking. But the reform policies that he is fronting are cutting through. And I think that the Conservative Party, at the moment, I don't think there is enough of a difference in people's minds between the two main parties on some of the big issues. So, for instance, if you were voting based on immigration, you would look at perhaps the Labour Party's record from 97, you'd look at the Tory Party's record from 2010, and you'd say, well, neither party is one that I could trust on that issue. You look at the tax burden that we're under the Tories, the highest that it's ever been. Under Labour, obviously, many people worry that the tax burden would be high, even though we had some assurances over this weekend. Many of the think tanks have said none of the big parties are actually being honest about the tax burden that we might end up with.
So whereas are you saying Reform would actually benefit from being an unknown quantity? They are going to benefit by the fact that they have no past record?
Yes, that, and I think that Reform are taking the space where the normal Tory voter would normally go, and the Tories have dropped the ball on some of those issues. Again, I don't agree with everything that Reform says, but I think a lot of their policies, which would have probably been traditional Conservative policies, are cutting through. Now, I consider myself centre-right. I didn't like Brexit. I agree with you that Nigel Farage was the person that kind of was responsible for a big part of Brexit. But as someone who would probably normally have voted Conservative, I haven't for a long time, I look at some of Reform's policies on some of the big issues, tax being a massive part of that, and think, well, actually, that's the ground the Conservatives should normally be on. And so I think if Suella Braverman has a point, if the Conservatives want Conservative voters, then it's the reform policies that Farage is fronting that they should be taking on board.
Do let us know your thoughts on this. Should the Conservative Party align with the Reform Party, really? Would that be a sensible move for them? Would that mean that the Conservatives would then potentially get your vote? 0207 862 2222. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Just discussing their policies there. There isn't a huge difference between the two of them. I mean, Nigel Farage is calling for a zero net migration, and Rishi Sunak is saying that they want to come up with a cap every year. I mean, that cap might be net zero.
Yeah, but if I was voting based on a cap on immigration for any of the parties, I wouldn't believe a word that they said, because we heard tens of thousands from the Conservative Party ages ago. We had immigration going up massively from 97 in the last Labour government. So yes, you're quite right. There are lots of promises being thrown around on immigration, but Nigel Farage, love him or loathe him, has been, firstly, a lot of people agree with him and he does cut through to a lot of people. And also, he has been saying the same thing about immigration for a long time and doesn't have that proven record that has let people down. So going back to your point about them being that unknown quantity.
But you see, the whole point of Nigel Farage is immigration. This is where he cuts through. And it's the underlying...
Well, he's made some comments on other things now. I mean, they have other policies. They want to reform on the NHS.
But the appeal that reform has to many voters, or many people who like reform, is the immigration thing. There's an underlying hint of racism. That's he is appealing to people's greatest fears about immigration, about people being different, about people coming in and taking our jobs, or using up all the hospital spaces, or that is...
So do you believe that the comment that he made on Friday in that interview, there was a dog whistle element to it?
Yes, there was.
To be saying what other people...
I think there was, because he's so clever. He's so clever, Farage. He really is, because he goes to the line and just slightly tips over, but then not enough that you can actually accuse him.
Well, and Laura Kuenssberg actually questioned him on it, and he doubled down on what he had said.
You said that he wasn't patriotic, and you said that Rishi Sunak didn't understand our history and our culture. What did you mean by that?
Yeah. Absolutely right. He couldn't make a mistake over D-Day. He should have known in his heart that it was right to be there. I was there. I've been raising money for some weeks to send veterans back to Normandy. The vast majority of people in Britain felt this commemoration was important, and the last opportunity to honour the remnants that are still alive. And by the way, I know what your question's leading at. 40% of our contribution in World War I and World War II came from the Commonwealth. He is utterly disconnected by class, by privilege, from how the ordinary folk in this country feel. He revealed that, I think, spectacularly when he left Normandy early.
Do you think that was
so
a fair
clever?
comment?
So clever by having that as a sort of rebuttal. So clever, because race is not mentioned. Of course, race would not be mentioned, but there's that little hint of it in saying our culture being other, ours and not his. There is that hint of it, and that's where he's dangerous.
I mean, I don't agree with the word culture being used. I think that's when you're using the word culture in the context of someone who is of a different ethnicity, I think that you need to be more careful than using those sorts of words. But I do need to take issue a little with the idea that someone who might be attracted to reform, not necessarily Nigel Farage, but reform, who has concerns about immigration, that they would perhaps be attracted to that hint of racism that you are accusing of, because I don't think that's the case. I think if you are someone who feels that the country does not have the resources for the numbers that we have allowed in over the last 30 years by both successive governments, I think that that's an argument about maths. I think that's an argument about infrastructure versus population. I think that that's an argument we've seen research from the Resolution Foundation over the course of the weekend, which has said that our economy has grown, and many people would point to that being a great thing, I agree, as a result of numbers going up. But that doesn't mean that people who are perhaps at the lower end of the wage level of society have seen those benefits. Now, those arguments aren't based on racism. They're based simply on resources and failures of government, not failures of people coming here.
Yes, but there is still that element, and I think that's where what he plays to.
Oh, is what you're saying that the sort of penguin theory, that not all birds are penguins, but all penguins are birds? So if you are sort of racist in your views, that the Reform Party may be a party that you align yourself with more often, not that every voter of Reform is in fact racist.
Exactly that. Exactly that. Of course.
And I think that's a really important distinction to make.
Absolutely. Dee from Lancashire, would the Conservatives be more likely to get your vote if they aligned with Reform?
Absolutely.
Why is that?
I think Nigel Farage speaks sense. I'm not really a fan of any political party. I'm not confident about anything that they do. I don't believe most of what's said, and I wouldn't believe most parliamentarians over anything. Farage actually is authentic, and it's his authenticity that appeals hugely to me. He just says how it is. He says what he thinks, and he's not afraid.
Is it also, Dee, though, that he's never been a standing MP, for example? He's never been in a governing party, so he has no track record to say anything other than what he's saying.
I think he has a track record, and what he says makes sense, and I think he's an incredibly intelligent man. How much more do you need, really? I think maybe it shows it's even better, the fact that he hasn't been standing, because it shows that he doesn't just want the position or to get ahead for his own ends. I think he's possibly been really coerced into doing this because there isn't anybody. There is nobody that anyone seems to have any faith in at all.
You think he's been bullied into standing as a leader of Reform?
I think there will be a lot of people behind him having persuaded him. That's what I think.
So, Dee, it sounds like you have a huge amount of faith in Nigel Farage. So why on earth would you want them to align with the Conservative Party, a party you have absolutely no faith in? Surely you would want them to remain separate and identifiably different.
Well, ideally, yes, but he wouldn't actually get anywhere if he did that. So I also think he's intelligent enough to understand exactly the position he needs to take to be able to genuinely move forward and create change.
So a coalition between the two?
Goodness.
Can I ask you what, because I've looked into this and I can't really find a huge difference between the Conservative Party policies and the Reform policies. They all kind of travel along the same lines. What's the biggest difference between the two for you?
I think for me, the fact that Rishi Sunak has been relatively ineffective. I don't think he's in tune at all with the everyday Joe Blow. I don't think he understands what people want. And I think Farage is a much stronger personality. I think many political leaders from Labour to the Conservative are being swayed by certain global organisations rather than what's right for this country. And I think Farage actually understands what's right for this country. And thank goodness for that, because it's about time somebody did.
Nina?
I was going to say, Dee, can I ask you a question, please?
Yes.
A little while ago, you said that Nigel Farage was brave. What did you mean by that?
I think anybody is brave who is prepared to stand up and be counted. And
in what way?
To even want to be involved in any way in politics and take that level of responsibility. I think anybody who does that is brave.
But then anybody who stands as an MP, therefore, by your reasoning, is brave. What makes him different?
I think his intelligence and the quality of what he says. I think he's just very authentic. And I think we all know the difference when we hear somebody who speaks authentically and when we hear someone and we don't believe a word they say. And that's very much a gut feeling. Okay. And my gut tells me he talks sense.
OK, Dee, thank you so much for your call. Kevin from London, what's your view when it comes to Reform Party joining up with the Conservatives? Do you think that'd be the only way the Conservatives would get back in?
I think it would be the end of the Conservative Party. There's no doubt in anyone's mind. This party, if it's led by Farage, will be a racist party running the country. I use the word racist in its fullest sense. He is a racist.
For that, though, Kevin?
Sorry?
Where's your evidence for that? You can't base that on saying that he doesn't believe that Rishi Sunak understands our culture.
His statements over the years, and he's a very clever man. I'm not taking that away from him. He's a very clever man, but he is a racist, and the Conservative Party are going through a bad time, but don't go from bad to worse.
Kevin, the difficulty is when you come onto a show and claim someone is a racist and you don't have anything to back it up, that makes it quite difficult. There's no, what has he said? What has he done to make you believe that he is racist?
I can't quote word for word, but he over the years...
Is it a feeling you have about the individual? A feeling you have about about Nigel Farage's beliefs?
I'm sticking to what I said. I might lack the actual statements of day to day what he said, but the image is that he is a racist, and I stick by it. And the idea that the Conservatives linking up with it, I mean, I'm a Liberal, and I've got many Conservative friends, and they're mortified that they get close to Farage.
Kevin, thank you very much for your call. If it is just a message to everybody, if we're going to call somebody racist, we'd better have something to back that up. Leslie from Manchester, how do you feel about Nigel Farage teaming up with the Conservatives? Do you think that would be a win for the Tories?
I think we should just have Nigel Farage. I mean, if the Conservatives are willing to back up Nigel Farage, then yes. But I would want Nigel Farage as a leader because, as has been said, he is not a racist. The man is not a racist. Obviously, he's heard about all the threats from the young Muslims, and goodness knows, we know that we have terrorists in this country. We know that we do, and it's only a matter of time.
Do you agree, though, Leslie, that some of his comments are actually inflammatory? No. And if you were an ethnic minority in this country, some things that he says are dog whistling. Only maybe you would hear it. You wouldn't hear it necessarily if you were a middle-class white person in Britain. You would only hear it if you were from an ethnic minority.
I believe for those people who are in this country, that he's never ever said, "Oh, we want you Asians out. We want you Indians out." He's just now trying to stop the numbers. He's going to stop the refugees coming in.
Talking about small boats, because there is a big distinction here, and we get it confused quite a lot between legal migration, which he wants to get down to zero. So that doesn't, Leslie, mean nobody coming into the country. It just means a one in, one out policy. And what you're talking about, I think, when you're referring to refugees, because we have refugees coming in legally, is the people coming over in small boats, which he wants to either, I don't know, turn back to France, which France won't take them. So I don't know how he's going to do that.
Well, this is it. It's the problem. It's just got completely out of hand, and I wish he'd got in years before. I don't know how he'll do it, but I know I trust the man, and I know that I don't believe for one second that he is a racist. Like the lady said before, I think he's a very brave man. You know, he's to stand up and speak against the young people being radicals, and I think. He's a very brave man. And when that woman that lady, I should say, threw that milkshake at him, I'm not surprised that he was scared and that he reacted, because it could have been
any substance of you in public. That would be frightening. So he's brave again, Nina.
This is why I say he is so dangerous, because people are fooled by him.
I think I know why people think that he's brave, and I think that there is some credence to that point of view from the perspective that if you look back at 1997 to 2010, when Labour were elected 3 times with huge majorities, that was at a time when everyone was very pro-EU. Labour had more pro-EU policies that we were getting re-elected on, and he and a few others, love or loathe him, were going against the grain at that point politically by holding their hands up saying, I don't agree with the direction of travel. That is brave. Whether you like him or not, that is brave.
But I think people are talking about him as brave in the sense that he says he talks about immigration in the way they like.
OK, well, we're going to have to round that conversation up here. It is worth saying that both parties have ruled out any sort of negotiation between the two. It was just an interesting comment made by Suella Braverman. Leslie, thank you very much for your call. Thanks for all your calls on this.